Hello and welcome to another video in our Power Apps and Automate Architecture series hosted by the Power Cats team. Today we're going to talk about Power Platform environment management strategies, both inside of Microsoft and beyond. I'm going to be talking to Tasha Scott. Tasha, do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Tasha Scott. I am a business program manager inside our global sales and marketing organization on a sales operations team that powers our sales processes and tools.
Great, thank you. And then my name is Manuela. I'm a program manager on the Power Apps customer advisory team. So I work closely with our marquee customers in helping them define their environment and DLP strategies and helping them accelerate their adoption. Today we'll talk a little bit about what it means to establish a center of excellence. We'll share specifically some proven practices in establishing an environment strategy and how tooling approaches can help you with that. And then Tasha will share how they've put the center of excellence to work and how our central IT team and her organization have put together a Power Platform environment strategy. And at the end, we'll share some resources for you to get started. So first, I'll be talking a little bit about some of the best practices, and those are definitely influenced by customers that our team is working with on a daily basis. In order to create a space where admins and makers can operate confidently and productively and work together well, we see many organizations establish a center of excellence. We think of this as a coordinating function that ensures that the Power Platform strategy in your organization is aligned with the digital transformation strategy. It means nurturing organic growth and maintaining governance and control at the very same time. A key principle here is to clarify why you're setting up a center of excellence, what your key goals are, and what business outcomes you hope to achieve with those, and then get started and learn and evolve along the way. So for many, setting up a center of excellence is that very first step in kind of driving the innovation and improvement, bringing together like-minded people that learn from each other, that collaborate together, and have kind of similar business goals and share that knowledge and success with each other, but at the same time providing standards, consistency, and governance to the organization. Independent of how small or large your center of excellence is, it typically falls into these three buckets that we see on the screen here. There's a part of kind of organizing your strategy and vision, defining what success looks like for you. There's an element of administration and governance, setting up the digital guardrails and proactively monitoring, and then activating your makers by nurturing a thriving community. Today, we want to focus especially on establishing environment strategies, which is a key part of the admin and governance bucket. This bucket ensures that digital guardrails are in place and makers can confidently create, but also that admins can kind of be confident in what their makers are doing within with the Power Platform and within those environments. We've put some of these best practices together under aka.ms Power Platform guidance, so you can read up about some more of our administration and governance best practices outside of the environment strategy that we'll talk about today. Typically, when you start establishing an environment strategy, there's kind of a few points to follow. First, you will need a Power Platform service admin role that grants access to Power Apps, Automate, and Power BI without kind of being a global admin. So you can have a dedicated role that looks after the Power Platform, or you could have an environment admin that looks after a certain set of environments. And I think that's the case for what Tasha is going to talk about in what the sales organization at Microsoft is doing. From a central point of view, you want to restrict the creation of net new production environments to admins. This is beneficial in maintaining control in general, so you prevent unaccounted capacity consumption and you reduce the number of environments that you need to manage. And users can request the environment creation or access to environments through central IT, so it puts the admin in the approval path of the environment creation, and it's easier to see what people are working on if the admin is acts as the gatekeeper. In your organization, you will have a default environment, and we would recommend treating that as a productivity environment for team and employee use cases. You should rename the environment in the admin center so that the purpose of the environment is self-explanatory, and clearly communicate to your makers that the default environment is used for maybe individual and very small team productivity scenarios, but not your business important and mission critical applications. And then, so now you've kind of got your shared productivity environment, like the default environment, and you've locked down the creation of new environments. So you now want to establish a process for requesting environments or requesting access to other environments. And typically, like a very important part of this is automating this process, either through setting up forms or apps, or using flows for that process, because otherwise an admin will get bogged down with the manual task of creating environments, and they'll have like lots of emails to deal with. So very important as an early point is establish that process for the automation. And then also to kind of secure the connectors that can be used in those environments, establish data loss prevention policies to really put those guardrails in place and dictate which connectors can be used in each of those environments. And here it's really important to work with your makers to like learn what connectors they need to use, and what their use cases are, what projects they're hoping to develop with the Power Platform, and create the data loss prevention policies in line with what your maker scenarios are. So every environment that you create will take up capacity in your tenant, and very often you want to kind of restrict the number of environments that you have and accelerate onboarding of new makers as well. So we do recommend setting up several shared environments that can be used by individuals and teams. So you will have the default environment that we've already talked about briefly. Everyone in your tenant has permissions to create apps and flows in that environment. You can't kind of block the environment maker role assignment in this environment. And it's also used for first-party integrations like creating apps from SharePoint lists. To reduce the risk to data, the types of connectors used in the default environment should be a less permissive data loss prevention policy that covers kind of common individual and small team productivity use cases, like working with SharePoint data, sending emails, or having an approval workflow. This environment covers quite a lot of productivity use cases, but might not be enough to cover all of them in your tenant. So we do recommend setting up a power user environment where more advanced makers can develop their apps, like integrating with Microsoft Teams, with Azure Active Directory, or with Azure DevOps. This shared environment would have a more permissive DLP policy, but admins control who is a maker in that environment. So you kind of review the connectors that are available based on your advanced maker needs. You document the purpose of that environment very clearly. So you set up a SharePoint site or a wiki where makers can learn about this environment being available to them. And then you will have an automated process in place for makers to request access to that environment. And in kind of the same sense, it might make sense for you to create a Power Dev environment as well, where maybe some of your makers with a more traditional dev background can explore the use of the Power Platform, and they might have connectors like SQL or Azure functions available to them to really explore using those connectors together with the Power Platform. And you then will have a need for probably training environments. So if you conduct hackathons or trainings, it might be necessary to really spin down the environment after the training has occurred, to make sure that the tenant is kept tidy and you don't have 500 Contoso device ordering apps in the default environment. So we do recommend kind of creating either like a trial environment or a sandbox environment that can be cleaned up after the event has happened. And again, like the connectors in that environment are specific to the training scenario that is happening, and the trainer could be the environment maker, that the environment admin that can keep that environment tidy as well. The shared environments cover many use cases of applications, but many teams and projects will benefit from having dedicated custom environments to support their business unit specific use cases, their application lifecycle management scenarios, and really those business important and mission critical applications. So for those environments, you will need to work really closely with the project teams or the business units to establish what type of environments they need. Do they need a development, test, and production environment, or are they going to go straight from dev to production? Is it a dedicated production environment, or is there perhaps already an existing production environment that they could deploy their applications to, and they just need a dedicated project development environment? So as an example here could be that you've got a managed production environment for your HR applications. And if a new project team comes along and they are developing an application for HR specifically, they get a dedicated development environment, but they deploy that solution to that already existing managed HR production environment there. So you would consider kind of the dedicated environments for like critical projects and workloads, perhaps. Developers only have maker access in the development environment, and they have end user access in the test and production environments, and that ensures the integrity of the applications in test and productions. Make sure that makers cannot modify those applications once they're in those downstream environments. And the same is true for kind of shared test and production environments, where the environment maker doesn't have any permissions to edit application or modify the resources outside of kind of end user access in those test and production environments. And here you really, again, work with the business units to establish what connectors are needed in each of those environments and who is going to be a maker, who is going to be an end user, and who perhaps will be an environment administrator. As you think about provisioning the environments, there are some factors to take into consideration as you kind of define the what types of environments you need. And one consideration to take into account is the tiers of application support. So is it going to be the maker that supports the application? Is it a mission critical application that needs where the support is owned by IT? What's the ALM process that is required for the application, and how will the end users be impacted by kind of by the application? So those are important measures on how to provision environments to support all those scenarios. So you will have like productivity applications that don't need a high level of governance. You will have important applications that are important to a business unit, but they might not be mission critical and can be supported by the department that owns them. And then you will have like mission critical scenarios or perhaps enterprise-wide or org-wide usage of applications where the support and development might be owned by IT and they will have a robust ALM process. And I think it's really important to think about that with your application development. Not everything will be a productivity application, but equally not everything will be a critical application. So it's kind of important to consider the whole spectrum there. And the other part that's really, really important is communication. The whole Power Platform admin and governance story comes together through makers and admins working efficiently together and communicating well. So kind of as a minimal effort, we would recommend setting up a SharePoint site or a wiki where you clearly state the purpose of the default environment, of the shared environments, where you clearly state the connectors that are available and how to request additional connectors, how you request custom connectors, but also share the responsibilities of a maker in terms of like keeping the tenant tidy, sharing wisely, and protecting the organization data. So I think those are kind of the first steps in making that communication with the maker a lot easier. And then a key part in managing the Power Platform at scale is also being able to automate some of those administrative tasks. And for that, you can use the Power Platform management connectors, and you can use the platform itself to automate the platform governance, basically. So many of our customers automate the provisioning and lifecycle of new environments using the Power Platform itself. So they will have a Canvas application where makers can request environments. They provide all the necessary information, and it goes through an approval process that leads to an automatic provision of the environment. So this is kind of a more advanced example. Some of our customers just use a Microsoft form to do that as well. The screenshots that you're seeing here are coming soon to the Center of Excellence Starter Kit. So you will soon have a template available that you can base your own solution on. And then on the topic of the COE Starter Kit, just kind of briefly, it is a templatized implementation of best practices. It's kind of a collection of a dashboard, apps, and flows designed to help you get started with developing a strategy for adopting and supporting the Power Platform. We have many customers kind of getting a lot of value from it, and an element of it is also the environment management there. Great. So yeah, like we said earlier, a lot of the value in the Power Platform and a lot of the activation of your makers happens when IT and makers or your COE and makers communicate well together, and that goes kind of beyond setting up, beyond automating the environment, request management, and a lot of that will happen as your adoption matures. But a typical path that we see is that IT obviously sets up kind of secure foundations. They've got the environment strategy, DLP strategy. Makers start building their applications. They then receive an automatic welcome email with internal policies, a link to a community that they can join. And then the IT monitors kind of the app usage, app creation. They might reach out to makers to get more information about apps that they are building. Makers learn about some of those shared environments where they can explore the product further, so they request access to those. They then might have an idea for an enterprise app or a business important application, so they start requesting custom environments and the connectors that they need for that. And through all of this, the automation and communication with the IT department is going very well. They're clearly informed of the guidelines that are available to them, of the policies that a maker has to follow, and IT can really focus on kind of the tenant hygiene and identifying perhaps orphaned or unused resources to archive them. But I think the responsibilities are like clear between IT and the maker, and that communication is kind of key in a successful adoption. With that, I'll hand it over to Tasha, who will share with us how the Center of Excellence at Microsoft works, and especially how they've implemented an environment strategy in the sales organization that she's part of.
Awesome. Thanks, Manuela. Thank you so much, Manuela. And I'm really excited to be here talking today about how Microsoft applies the principles that Manuela was just talking about as sort of a customer zero. The global sales and marketing organization is large enough to be sort of like a mini enterprise within an enterprise. We work very closely with our partners in Microsoft's central IT organization to sort of take the environments that the environment management strategy that they've applied and expand that out or move that closer to where our makers are. As you might be able to sort of tell from the name, Global Sales and Marketing Organization is a worldwide organization. And we have a number of roles out in our field subsidiaries where we have a lot of innovation happening using the Power Platform, and our field roles love to make things using Power Apps and Power Automate to make their lives and their jobs easier. And we want to encourage that while safeguarding Microsoft data. And so we leverage the Center of Excellence Toolkit at this sort of mini tenant within a tenant level to make that happen and really bring that vision to life. So you heard Manuela talk about how the product group recommends doing a series of different and escalating permissiveness shared environments for your makers to leverage, and we absolutely apply that within Microsoft internally. We have a number of shared environments where we start with the personal productivity environment, which we've renamed to Microsoft Personal Productivity, and it has probably the least permissive data loss prevention policy applied to it. Things like your modern workplace workloads that include SharePoint, OneDrive, Outlook, things like that, where you're really just building tools to empower yourself and make your daily productivity really shine. And then we have a power user environment and a pro dev environment that each have a few more connectors included in it to help really accommodate more and more complex business automation scenarios. So the power user environment, as Manuela mentioned, includes things like Azure DevOps and includes Azure Active Directory connectors. And the Power Dev environment the Pro Dev environment allows things like the SQL connector and other escalated connectors as needed. And within the sales environments, we have a dedicated series of environments that we've applied the Center of Excellence Toolkit to, and we worked very closely with a Fusion dev team that sits between our group as the business and our central IT organization to sort of administer these environments and help us when it comes to applying dedicated data loss prevention policies that are custom for our environments. As you might imagine, as a sales organization, a lot of our data resides in Dynamics. And we have created a number of custom connectors with pro developer resources to leverage internal data sources as well via APIs that we have, private APIs. When we were thinking about setting up this structure where we have sort of our mini tenant within the overall governed tenant that Microsoft Central IT provides, we had a number of things in mind. Obviously, our Central IT organization is really concerned and keen on managing and governing our internal Power Platform implementation. And so there are a number of governance rules that we inherit from that sort of like top level of the Microsoft Central IT organization. And then we wanted to be able to sort of work within that for the data sources that we need as well. We applied the Center of Excellence Toolkit, which gives us insight into all the apps and flows and the custom connectors that are leveraged within the data loss prevention policy that is custom for our environments. We can see our most active makers so that we can make sure that they're engaged and we can give them the support that they need. And we can make sure that things that reach a certain critical level receive the proper compliance assessments as well. We do privacy, accessibility, and security assessments for apps and flows that reach that level of criticality here in Microsoft. But we also wanted to make sure that we were enabling our makers as much as we were giving them guidelines. We're really fortunate to have a number of innovative solution makers here internal to Microsoft. We're a company of tinkerers, as you might imagine us to be. And so people aren't afraid to get their hands dirty and get hands-on with our own technology. So we wanted to give them a few things to help them go faster and to guide them along the way and to give them inspiration and support as they go. So we wanted to create things like technical documentation to connect to some of our internal sales data that's based in Dynamics in the most efficient manner. We also wanted to keep them informed on their responsibilities as makers working with this data, things like security guidelines and accessibility guidelines to consider while they're building their applications. We also set up a number of community rhythms so that when things happen in our tenant, because the Power Platform is constantly evolving and our implementation evolves alongside the product and the platform, we wanted to keep people informed as those changes happen, and we communicate those out through various means, including monthly meetings. And we wanted to provide them some little beefier tools that are provided by our pro dev resources. Things like components and PCF controls. We also want to create a custom connector library for makers in our environments to create things leveraging those private APIs that we talked about earlier. This is really key as part of leveraging the Fusion Dev vision that the product envisions. And all of that vision that we just talked about sort of applies to this virtuous governance cycle that we put into practice here internally to Microsoft. We work really closely with our central IT organization, and as the platform evolves and as the products within the platform evolve, they create a tenant-wide governance structure that gets administered and pushes out to all of the environments that are within our tenant. Within the sales organization, we have frontline insight into those changes in the platform, and we build our guidance and our patterns and practices around that sort of top-level guidance to start. And then we take that guidance and we share it with our user communities that are globally distributed and building apps all around the world through various communication lanes, such as dedicated team sites, those monthly meetings that we talked about, and newsletters that go out. And our end user communities adopt these changes and provide feedback to us, which we then share back with the central IT organization in terms of things like where we see opportunities for adding new connectors, or places where changes in the platform have caused either breakages or places where we need to adjust to accommodate those changes. And creating this continuous governance and feedback cycle means that we're keeping everybody up to date on the changes that happen in the tenant, and we're keeping Microsoft data safe. Our mini tenant looks like this. Because we're a globally distributed organization, we have created a set of 8 environments that are 2 each for 4 globally distributed regions: APAC, EMEA, LATAM, and North America. And for each of those regional divisions, we have 2 environments: a dev environment and a productivity environment. The productivity environment is automatically granted access to anyone who has access to our sales data. And folks are encouraged to build their personal productivity solutions that leverage sales data within these production environments. The dev environments are a little more permissive in terms of allowing folks to build their custom tables in Dataverse there. And we grant access to the dev environment on a case-by-case basis, as more complex applications need to use a little bit broader access level, which is basically system customizer rights versus environment maker rights. And to support these 8 environments, we've adopted a support and graduation framework where we encourage people to build their individual productivity and small team productivity apps out in the sort of tier 3 part of this, where we don't anticipate application lifecycle management practices will need to be adopted. As Manuela mentioned, the productivity apps that we anticipate being built in these cases are usually fairly simple and don't require a lot of complex application lifecycle management layers applied on top of that. Some of these solutions grow in either complexity or in impact, or even in the amount of folks that are using them. And so we work with those teams to gain leadership sponsorship for a little bit greater level of support, as you can see in the tier 2. Those apps are things that are leveraged beyond just an individual's team. When you start to get into cross-team impact applications and flows, that's where we start to advocate for a little bit more support, and application lifecycle management layers start to be applied on top of that. And then we get to 2 different flavors of critical business applications, either cross-organizational or cross-area solutions that are used and critical to the business, or things that start right from the gate as a worldwide envisioned solution. Those are the kinds of applications and solutions that my team builds. And both those tier 1 applications and the worldwide applications get pushed into a worldwide production environment with the highest level of security and very limited administrative access only. That when we talk about those tier 1 and those worldwide solutions, those have the highest level of application lifecycle management support tied to them. We only allow administrators to push those solutions into the global productivity environment. And those things are all pushed in there as managed solutions from their respective dev environments.
Thanks for sharing those great insights. I think it's really important for our customers to also see how Microsoft is working internally, but also how our best practices that we publish are influenced both by our customers, but also by what we do internally. Like, we're really embracing kind of the best practices that are published. So how do you get started? Our best practices, including the environment strategy, are published under aka.ms Power Platform Guidance, where you can read up on all of those best practices that we just talked about. Some of our customer stories are published under aka.ms Power Platform Stories. So here you can really find inspiration of how other customers are working and how they are doing their Power Platform adoption. So definitely worth checking out. And then if you found this video, you've probably already checked it out, but under aka.ms PP Arc series, you will find the architecture series presented by my team. So there's a lot of videos and deep dives into architectural topics like admin and governance, establishing a COE, and the environment strategy. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video, and I really hope it was useful to you.
Thank you.